Welcome to Hamburgers and Horror, the home of meat, monsters, and murderous good guy dolls. I'm Noah Hook, and today we're looking at Child's Play 2. Chucky's second installment takes place 2 years after the original as he continues his hunt for Andy, who has now been placed in the foster care system. The success of the first film led to a sequel being greenlit really quickly, but it almost never happened. United Artists, who produced Child's Play, was bought by a larger group, which had no interest in making horror movies. A huge bidding war began, with Universal ultimately claiming the rights. Child's Play 2 saw the return of Don Mancini, David Kirshner, and John LaFia, with LaFia directing this time around. Mancini now had an interesting challenge. He was more or less stuck with ideas that were added into the movie that weren't in his original script. I'm specifically talking about the voodoo and its shaky specificities. But it was also an opportunity for him to use parts of his original script that were cut from the movie, such as Mrs. Kettlewell and the ending in the factory. And overall, there is a larger emphasis on marketing and corporation that Mancini wanted to explore, as well as a more in-depth look at Andy and the effects of what he's been through. It seems he, LaFia, and Kirshner were on very similar pages about what they wanted this movie to be. Child's Play 2 had a $13 million budget, $4 million more than the original. That and a returning Kevin Yeager meant the Chucky animatronics were upgraded from last time. So much so, there wasn't a need for any human stand-ins. Chucky could do it all now. It ended up grossing $36 million worldwide, but it wasn't met with as much love as the original. Critics found it unnecessary and unpleasant, and Siskel and Ebert even listed it on their list of worst films for 1990. It's definitely more divisive than the original. I've been looking at rankings for the franchise, and people have had it listed at the very top and going all the way down to around where Seed and 3 sit. It currently has a 44 and 47 on Rotten Tomatoes, which I think is low but is consistent with most horror sequels. I personally think Child's Play 2 is a pretty solid sequel, and it allows you to skip straight forward into the Chucky action, but it's probably about time we get into it. Better hide your ceramic family heirlooms, because it's time for Child's Play 2. As the credits roll and some really dramatic music plays, we see the charred Chucky head from the first film being scraped clean, even getting some dental work done. Oh shit, our boy's getting a whole remodeling job done. As a limo pulls in, we see this is happening at the Play Pals headquarters, which is the company that makes the good guys. We meet CEO Mr. Sullivan and his lackey Mattson, who gives us a big exposition dump. Basically, the story about Chucky is all over the news and the company is in hot water, despite the police not backing up Karen's story, which has led to her being mentally evaluated and Andy being put into a children's crisis center. To help curb the rumors, Mattson has acquired the doll and they are rebuilding Chucky to prove he isn't evil. Sure, that makes total sense. Sullivan wants to see for himself, and he's just in time to see Chucky's eyes be put in. But once they're in, Chucky's eyes turn red and the machine electrocutes the shit out of one of the workers and launches him through the glass. Only 6 minutes in, hell yeah. As paramedics arrive, Sullivan tells Mattson to cover this up or he's out of a job, and we see Chucky has already gotten used to his new legs, as Sullivan tells him what to do with the doll.
Stick it up your ass.
We head over to the crisis center, where a therapist is with an older and wiser Andy Barkley. Andy recounts the events of the first movie, but is smart enough to pretend it was all a bad dream. Andy is being window shopped by longtime foster parents Joanne and Phil Simpson. Joanne is happy to give a home to Andy until Karen recovers, but Phil doesn't like the idea, cause, it sounds pretty crazy. Social worker Grace Poole assures them that the doll story was a coping mechanism that Andy has come to terms with and is just hoping for a fresh start. We cut to Andy in the car, and Joanne learns that Andy likes chocolate and eggs, a man with a sophisticated palate, I must say. Phil almost gets them all crushed by a Play Pals truck, but they make it home in one piece. Andy looks around at this god-awful looking house, and Phil starts laying down the law.
First rule, don't touch the old stuff.
And Joanne tells Andy the super important tchotchke has been in her family for generations. Andy heads upstairs and walks in on the music-blaring, cigarette-smoking Kyle, who is also being fostered by the Simpsons. Joanne snags her cigarettes but is chill about it, and shows Andy his room, which is chocked full of toys. But he gets ambushed by a good guy, and Big Bad Phil yells at him for running and having trauma, and Joanne takes the doll. That night, Mattson is heading out with Chucky in a thunderstorm. Chucky doesn't fit in the trunk and gets comfy in the back with a bunch of other toys Mattson has for no good reason. Madsen has a hot date tonight and stops by a liquor store, giving Chucky time to give Grace Poole a call, thanks to some very convenient documents in the car. Under a real shitty alias, he finds out Andy's location and sets off Madsen's car alarm to get this show on a road. Madsen is on the road when Chucky pulls a gun on him, and Madsen seems more annoyed than anything. He has Madsen stop in an empty parking lot and ties his hands with a jump rope. He begs Chucky not to shoot him, and Chucky reveals it was just a squirt gun. The relieved Madsen is then suffocated to death with a plastic bag as Chucky shows off his mastery of the evil laugh. A return of the POV shot shows Chucky's infiltration of the Simpson house, which was really easy because this is white suburbia and people don't lock their damn doors. As Joanne reads and sings to Andy, Chucky smacks Tommy, the other good guy, and when the doll won't shut up, he smashes its face in with that important heirloom. Chucky buries the doll under a swing set, laughing maniacally as he does so. The next day, Phil confronts Andy and Kyle about the broken tchotchke and grounds them both when neither confesses. They are put on laundry duty where they bond over smoking and calling Phil grouchy, although Kyle tells him she's had much worse foster parents. But then Andy overhears Phil reconsidering having Andy around, fearing he needs more help than they can provide, but Joanne likes Andy and is determined to help him. Andy tells Incognito Chucky that he hates him and checks the doll for batteries, but we saw that they were put in during the intro. Convinced the doll isn't Chucky, he greets Phil and Joanne with it to prove he is back to normal. Andy and Kyle bond some more, and Chucky watches nervously as they almost uncover Tommy's corpse. Night falls, and Chucky can finally get down to business and ties up the sleeping boy. He tells Andy he missed him and has a new game to play.
Hide the soul.
Chucky begins the ritual but is immediately interrupted by Kyle, who is sneaking back in. She is confused by the strange setting and unties Andy, who starts yelling and socks Chucky in the mouth. The noise gets the attention of Phil and Joanne, who think Kyle tied up Andy to keep him from snitching on her. Andy insists that it was Chucky though, and angry Phil takes the doll and throws him down into the basement. Chucky's bleeding nose tells him he's running out of time. The next day, Kyle walks Andy to the bus stop and we see Chucky is hitched a ride. While Andy plays by himself, Chucky is in the classroom looking for his schoolwork. Mrs. Kettlewell already isn't big on Mr. Barkley, so when she sees Chucky's message to her, she grabs him and keeps him after class. She sees Andy eyeing Chucky and thinking he wants to play with him, locks the doll in the closet. Then she just locks him in there and goes the fuck away, I guess. Andy peeps into the peephole and Chucky quickly goes from friendly to ferocious, and Andy escapes through a window. Mrs. Kettlewell returns and thinks that it is Andy in the closet. No Andy here though, Mrs. Kettlewell, just Chucky with an air pump. In one of the more artistic deaths, Chucky beats Kettlewell to death with a yardstick, zooming further out with each lash. Andy gets back home and Phil is tired of all his Chucky talk. He shows Andy that Tommy is still in the basement, and I don't know how the fuck Chucky beat Andy back to the house. Joanne and Phil get into a heated argument about sending Andy away, and Kyle consoles him and tells him the system will only make him stronger. But Andy is concerned with more immediate problems.
Wherever I go, Chucky will find me.
That night, Andy arms himself with an electric carver and heads into the basement, where Chucky is indeed hiding. He gets spooked a couple times and even carves up the laundry before Chucky jumps him. Phil hears the commotion and goes to investigate. Andy is able to reach the carver and get it at Chucky's head before he runs off, just in time for Phil to find him in a very questionable position. He cautiously approaches Andy, but Chucky trips him and he breaks through the shitty banisters hanging by his foot. Chucky makes his presence known and releases him. Phil lands on his head, killing him. Joanne weeps over her husband and is finally turned against Andy. As Phil's body is taken away, Kyle consoles Joanne and helps her pack Andy's bags because he definitely isn't staying here now. Grace picks up Andy and he tells Kyle that Chucky is still in the cellar. As the police head out, Kyle spots the doll and throws it in the trash. She is smoking on the swing when she accidentally uncovers Tommy's corpse. Properly spooked, she checks the trash can to see that Chucky is gone. She hears a noise from Joanne's room and heads inside, arming herself with a dagger. Joanne is sitting at her sewing machine, and in a psycho-reminiscent shot, she swings around dead with a slit throat. Kyle falls back on the bed where Chucky creeps up and bursts out of. His legs flail around as they fight, and Kyle smacks him with a lamp. But Chucky is able to snatch the dagger from under the bed. He ends up tripping her, but he needs Kyle alive to give him a lift. Chucky tells her to speed up, but that gets the attention of the popo. Chucky tells her to floor it.
Get real, this is a station wagon.
Shit! Pull over.
The cop is really excited she has a good guy, but gets creeped out when Chucky's nose starts bleeding and eventually lets her go with a warning and tells her to buckle up. Meanwhile, Grace tucks Andy in, but he is done waiting and gets dressed to fight. Chucky again tells Kyle to step on it, but this time she buckles her seatbelt and slams on the brake, launching Chucky through the windshield. He climbs back on the car, but she's able to launch him off again. She tries to ram him, but he avoids the car and gets her back under control. Andy is moping around when the fire alarm goes off. He and a herd of children are leaving when he spots Kyle and Chucky. Grace comes down and, thinking Kyle pulled the alarm, brings them into her office. She snatches Chucky from Kyle and Chucky gives her a few stabs to the chest. She falls onto the copy machine and scans her dying face a few times for good record keeping. Kyle escapes, but Andy gets locked inside and Chucky has Andy carry him outside at knife point. They hop on a newspaper truck, but Kyle sees and is right behind them. The little red station wagon catches up to the truck, which Chucky is not happy about. She cuts off the truck, but Chucky and Andy are already running away, and she follows after escaping the angry driver. Now it's time for the main event of the evening, because we're at the motherfucking Play Pals factory. Kyle Indy rolls inside as Chucky brings Andy deep inside the good guy maze of death. Chucky knocks out Andy with a bonk to the head and he starts the incantation. The storm clouds roll in and we get to hear the whole chant because Chucky actually gets to finish it. But all Chucky gets for his effort is a nosebleed as he's been in the doll body too long and now he's stuck in it. Chucky's day gets even worse when Kyle knocks a bunch of good guys on him and Andy runs. They reconvene as a furious Chucky bursts out. They wander this giant maze of good guys for a long time and eventually find a magical doll conveyor belt that for some reason Kyle thinks they should climb. Andy has been skipping the gym and slips back down just in time for Chucky to strike. Andy climbs back up with Chucky right behind, promising to kill him. Kyle drops some sort of gate on his hand, giving them time to escape further into this Willy Wonka-ass factory. Apparently this thing is super heavy and Chucky rips his fucking hand off to get out. Never one to waste a good stump, Chucky upgrades to a shank arm. Kyle and Andy have to get past this bizarre doll eyeball implant machine, and the exit is for whatever reason locked. That machine gets clogged, finally getting the attention of a worker. Y'all know what's coming. He fixes the machine and gets slashed in the face by Chucky. The machine holds him in place as it implants some new eyes into him. Beautiful. We also see this interesting machine that attaches the arms and legs, and when Andy bumps a button and sends the machine in reverse, it creates horrifying monstrosities. They get distracted by something and Chucky sneaks up on them, but Andy dodges a slash and Chucky gets stitched to the platform. Andy sets the machine back to reverse and Kyle returns the finger to him. Chucky screams as the machine implants a bunch of body parts onto him, and they release this steaming pile of meat and rubber. And these fools actually think they won. Andy, did you not watch the first movie? You clearly didn't see this blood trail Chucky left behind. Chucky uses the dead worker's body to knock out Kyle, and legless Chucky comes at Andy again. But he gets his blade stuck in a vent right under a vat of molten rubber, and Stone Cold Andy pulls a lever to release the liquid death, which fucking wrecks Chucky, leaving him as a mound of melted plastic and flesh. He also narrowly saves Kyle from a gruesome death. They look over at the carnage and Andy's real proud of himself, but the still alive Chucky has a bit of fight left and attacks Kyle. But she's so done with this shit and sticks a loose air tube into his melty mouth. Chucky's hot, flexible head swells up with air and explodes gloriously. And that'll be the final nail in the coffin for Charles this time around. The movie ends with Kyle and Andy leaving the factory, unsure of where they are going to go. So that's Child's Play 2. I think it's a pretty fun sequel. Chucky is able to be Chucky pretty immediately, so it kind of gives viewers more bang for their buck than the original. Although I think it lacks the eeriness of Chucky being a doll most of the time. He's much more active and on screen this time around, and I think that's what probably puts it above or below the original for most people. Chucky is cracking some jokes here and there, and definitely laughing up a storm, but he is still pretty serious. He isn't just running around shouting shitty one-liners quite yet. It has a fun bunch of kills, and most of them are pretty unique. He is so scary looking when he's coming for Mrs. Kettlewell. And generally, 2 is just bigger and grander than the original. To a lesser degree, Child's Play 2 is to the original what Hellbound would be to the original Hellraiser, or Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 would be to the original. It's just bigger, grander, more fun. Everything's been amped up a bit. The PlayPal Factory is a fantastic setting for the finale, although them getting there seems a bit unlikely, and that's kind of a theme in Child's Play 2. There are a lot more times where you just have to let go when something really illogical happens, like the company going through the effort to clean and reuse the doll's skeleton, Mattson believing Chucky had a gun, Grace giving Andy's supposed Uncle Charles his exact location with no question, Chucky running all the way from school back to the house without being seen. These kinds of things happen kind of frequently. I know it's a voodoo killer doll movie, and I know no entry in this franchise is without its plot holes, but I gotta point them out when they're glaring. But there is still a lot I really enjoy about this movie. Of course, it's great to have Andy back, and his placement into the foster care system is a sad, realistic follow-up that I appreciate. I think Kyle makes a good surrogate Karen, although she isn't quite as fleshed out as I'd like. And Phil makes a great secondary antagonist. I re-hate his guts every time I watch this. There is a lot more emphasis on the commercialization and industrialization in the children's marketing world, and I really enjoyed it. Little things like Mattson trying to push the value of his credit card to the store owner and Chucky, the factory employees complaining about building a doll by hand, and both of the workers being killed by the machines they work with, they all make subtle little fun points. There's also something great about Chucky murdering another doll and burying him in the yard. This in some ways is Chucky at his most iconic, or at least recognizable. I was born in the late 90s, but I still remember going to the Blockbuster, and the Child's Play cover that scared me most was definitely Child's Play 2. And by now his personality is pretty figured out. He isn't just killing for revenge or survival, he's killing because he enjoys it. Chucky definitely had a place in the genre after the first Child's Play, but I'd say this is where he cemented himself as a top-tier slasher. All in all, I really enjoyed Child's Play 2. I think it makes a great double feature with the original. The same can't be said as much for Chucky's third outing, but next week we're actually taking a quick break from Child's Play to look at a patron-requested film, the low-budget, surprisingly creepy kind of found-footage horror film, 2013's Banshee Chapter. And remember, if you join my Patreon, you too can personally choose a movie for me to review. Well, that's about it. As always, I'm Noah Hook, and thanks for watching Hamburgers and Horror. Stay safe out there. Thanks for watching my review of Child's Play 2. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe so you can keep up with all of my Chucky content. And if you want to help support the channel further, be sure to check out my Instagram and Patreon. Thanks, y'all.